Chapter 6. A Certain Advice. When Carrot slapped his forehead on his hoof, he was careful to avoid the dollop of frosting that still sat on his nose. For the first time that morning, something had gone wrong, something that threatened their creation. The silver packets, raked happily with bows and shimmering paper, stood before them on a table. This was a problem, as they meant for it to be discovered when the gingerbread house was eaten. In short, they both realized as they looked at one another, with long looks of concern, they messed up. Cupcake brought him 2 large sanctions, her decisiveness coming to play. To their annoyance, their hoofwork had been too good. The foundation had already set, the prowess with the frosting working against them. As they set the gingerbread carefully down on the twin sansalins, they made sure it supported the structure, that the walls were now taking their entire weight of the gingerbread house. With that, she passed him a fine-tuned knife, and he went to work removing the foundation. Carrot's practiced hooves sat against the knife, against the seam of the frosting that held the walls of the foundation. The entirety of the project was now on the line, and together they would have decisions to make if they were to save it. He looked up to her, and with a nod she had told him to press on, and her mind went back to another time she had made a decision.
And we'll have browns, and reds, and oranges. Oh, and there'll be pumpkins and cornstalks, and we'll go to bobbing for apples, and we'll have a hayride. Why? Where are we going to get Lincoln? Our neighbors have Lincolns we can borrow. We can have neighbors come too, but wait, if we have Lincolns, then I have a Lincoln ride, which wouldn't be much fun. We can ride instead. How about we ride their wagon, then we...
Clyde sat at the table and watched her go through yet another detailed, essentially breathless description of a party she was planning. They never had a nightmare night party here on the farm. They had carved pumpkins, told a ghost story or two, had a few snacks, but then it was off to bed. There was work to be done after all. But these last few months, since she found her cutie mark, had been different. Everything had become different. They were all different. As their mother placed their dinner on the table, Clyde was able to interrupt her implores long enough to make a lead and invoke. And Susie was once again pouring forth her ideas. Clyde looked to Inky, Blinky, and Maud, the other 2 fillies, each showing supreme interest in their sister's vision. Clyde stared down the length of the table. Pazzler Pinky waited enthusiastically as he named all sorts of honorable ideas which to festoon her celebration, and looked to where his wife sat and ate her small share of the meal. Can I just say another thing I love about this fic? It's not just how the cakes got together. It's Pinky's origin story. Besides her cutie mark, this is all about how Pinky becomes the Pinky we know and love. And I love it. Roxy caught his eyes upon her and gave her a small smile. She watched him give a big sigh and a look of astounding expression across his face. Clyde waited as Roxy's reply came across the table, mouthed wordlessly over the continuing oration of their pink dart. "It'll be okay," she told him without words. "We'll get through it." He smiled back to her. He knew she was right. Still, these last months have been happy, but it was not through these weekly, and sometimes even more frequent, celebrations did not come at a cost. Autumn was the time for he and his fellow geoculturists to begin gathering in their rocks, the harvest of magic of Equestria that had settled within them, as the blessed sun had fallen them over during the summer. A delay of a day may not mean much, but it did mean more work for him. And he knew he was not getting any younger. Abruptly and pathetically, a single one of the gray hairs of his mane drifted down to his plate, blemishing his meal. He carefully removed it, looked for a second before laying it aside and turning to his supper. The purpose of her mark, he realized, needed to reveal itself. There had to be some way for her to do so, or he would soon be fat with party food and bald from worry. Pinky's tearful reflections soon faded as she ate, going up and down in a time with however much food she was simultaneously trying to eat and voice her ideas. "Pinkamena," her mother told her in soft tones. "Now's the time for eating."
"Okie dokie,"
replied the filly, settling back into her seat as her 2 sisters giggled slightly and returned to their own meals. I would say Maud is giggling, but small conversations arose from around the table as the dragging leaves of autumn floated around the farm, catching against the silo, the barn, and upon the fairy rocks that gave the farm its purpose. The city of Ponyville was alive in the warm evening, as lights fell from the faces of pumpkins that bubbled in candlelight.
Oh, look! The whole building's dressed up for Nightmare Night,
came the voice of one small pony. Carrot turned to look upon the visitor to his shop. He stood in the doorway, the double boiler disguised as a cauldron wherein sat melted caramel. Apples stood impaled upon their sticks nearby, drying in the night air as he tried to find who would be next to come and receive this offered treat. The bakery had been dressed up. It looked more like a gingerbread house now, and the change was permanent. The boy had been Cupcake's eye of advertisement. He sailed over the three little figures that smiled at him. He looked to the older pony who was guiding him. As he did, an awareness jumped up at him. As he removed the gauze from his face, he realized he was either looking at the very worst Princess Celestia costume in the history of Equestria, or the very best Princess Cupcake costume that any pony could imagine. He went with the latter. He stared at the little Colton fillies who looked up at him with big smiles, then back to her. As 1,000 questions shook through him, he looked at her. His puzzlement apparent even beneath his costume.
"This is all Cupcake's good friend, Mr. Carrot Cake. What do you say?" she said. "Nightmare Night, what a fright! Give us something sweet to bite!"
sighed out the costume trio. As he did, she smiled to him, her fake wings and horn bouncing around, as he back at her as the gauze once more slipped over his eyes.
"Oh, all right," he replied. "Come over here and we'll make you some apples."
Cupcake watched contentedly as the foals gathered around him, as he showed them how to carefully cover the apple, spin it to give it an even coat. "Yeah, I used to do that whenever I went to Sugar Cube Corner. Messed up every time, though. I love being a Pegasus, but darn those wings. My little brother, though, he did it better, being born a dragon and all."
"No, I'm not jealous."
With that, he held the caramel apple up, let it sit in a nearby drying rack covered with appropriate decorations.
"So, is this your shop?"
asked the little colt cheerfully as he and his sister selected their apples.
"Yep,"
replied a Carrot Cake beamed with pride.
"Carrot Cake's Bakery Company, LLC, Incorporated."
"That means really stinko,"
replied the colt. "Careful for your apple," replied Carrot, his mummy costume hiding a scowl that he did not want Cupcake to see. She giggled as he looked at her and saw her adjusting her costume once more. "You don't need to put business cards on these," she said as he lifted a crown farther up to her head and held it so. "Save them for the paying customers, you know."
"Right,"
he agreed, his voice becoming softer as he gazed happily over the mare.
"Sure thing, Princess Auntie Cupcake."
The two looked at one another and down over the cold fillies as they jabbered excitedly as their creations came to life. Adding to the business cards to the string that bound the complete caramel apple together had been Cupcake's idea, as was having him show off his confectionery skills here at the shop. As dozens of happy Nightmare Night celebrants trotted away from his bakery, he knew he had been right, as he always been. And somewhere, a serpent, derpy-eyed Pegasus has come down with her family to visit her dearest little friend Carrot Top, and she's dressed as a male mare. Soon the caramel apples were ready. He wrapped them up and set them aside for the foals to pick up after the Nightmare Night celebrations were complete. As the three foals met with friends who were soon to make apples of their own, Cupcake and Carrot smiled happily, each seeing how excited the foals had been. He looked at Princess Cupcake once more and helped her adjust herself. Their costumes were perfect metaphors. His was well done, but not suited to him. Hers was an excellent idea, but needed some touches. Between them, both knew that if the other had been involved, his practiced touch and her firm decisiveness, they would turn out better.
"We should help each other with our costumes next year," he giggled as he lowered the gauze. "Maybe even wear matching costumes."
Yes, we should," she giggled. As the sounds of the Nightmare Night celebration lifted beyond, the focus of the foals shifted. At once, he felt her hoof come to his mouth, dropping the gauze that stood there. For a long second, she lifted her kiss to him, and then sheepishly turned to her nephew and says, seeing him still distracted, she risked nuzzling beneath him, letting the fake horn fall and wings shudder, to move down the street again.
"You look good with the kids. I mean, you look good. You're good with kids," he breathed.
"Yes, we do. Ah, I am," she answered, blushing at her subconscious selectness of words. He watched the four head off to a new group of foals gathered at his cauldron. He looked back of him with a smile as he departed. As he led the next group through making their apples, he thought about what she had just done. She just introduced him to her family. Well, kind of. She chose him the word friend, had not let on that they were involved. She had hidden her kiss from them. Why she had done that? He pondered this for a moment, only stopping when a shock of pain from hot caramel went up his foreleg. Still, she had taken the risk, gone that much further, and taken another step in the game of this. He searched the distance for her. As his perfect princess disappeared to the crowd, he knew it was now his turn to give her a reason to offer more. Time moved forward. Phew! Ahem! Doctor, not so fast! All right, but I do so much fast, don't it? As though it were a stage direction, time drove onward, but the scene itself went largely unchanged. Only the falling fall of leaves as the hose of the runners had pelted past showed the participants in the game that the world of the two principal actors was drawing closer. Geez, Mom, he whispered. I told you she was coming.
I mean to get straightened up,
began Cheesecake as it began a small tremble and ran to brush across her coat in a worried motion. As she looked on, Carrie dumped various things into the hall closet.
I did get a few things to eat, so we could have a nice chat,
as he said, looking first to him, then back up into the door. A shadow across the nearby window showed the outline of a mare who waited patiently to be shown inside. It's okay, Mom. Just get these put away, Carrot said as he placed more items within. He then turned to see his thin mother looking towards the door, her hoof to the mouth. Slowly, he walked to her and laid his head to hers.
I don't want to embarrass,
she began. She's gonna love you, Mom, he interrupted. Just be you and everything will be fine. And with that, he opened the door, and Cupcake entered his childhood home. The conversation went surprisingly well. Soon the two mares had made their introductions and were complimenting each other on how wonderfully their manes had been made up, how nicely the flowers were arranged, and how beautiful the drapes were. By the time they were discussing the best local hairdressers, pony pedicures, and all other things that appealed to mares, Carrot suddenly remembered that he was, in point of fact, a stallion. As such, that type of talk essentially made him wish for nothing more than a sweet release of death. Now, you folks might be wondering, do I get worried about that if I ever start dating Applejack? Just to let you guys know, I know for a fact that there's no way Applejack will be talking about that. So, when I finally start dating her, it'll all be fine. I'll get us something to eat, he said as he stood and went into the kitchen. He trotted out into the old familiar space and looked into the cupboards. He found them shockingly bare. Soon the jelly cupboard and the pantry too proved to be essentially empty. Old worries went through his mind. In an instant, he had thrown his head into the icebox. It took him a second to realize that all that stood within was a box of baking soda, a rather old bottle of milk, and a tray of cheese with a few handfuls of crackers. He probably thought it was all that she had to make up. Oh, Mom, he whispered as some of the fears he had long had for her when he moved out came to life. Why was there no food? Why had she had eaten the last of real meal? He lifted the tray and brought it into the living room. I'm just going to run out for a second, he said. Grab some things, I'll be right back. He realized that the mares had barely even heard him. Cheesecake was far too busy showing Cupcake any number of embarrassing pictures of him as a foal from the white selection of albums that were coming off the shelf. As they giggled, he rolled his eyes and slipped out the door. He intended to head for the market, maybe grab up enough produce and cheeses to make a proper meal. As he turned down his own familiar street to the fountain square, he witnessed something that made him stop and have his jaw drop open. As ponies hurried past him in the opposite direction, a booming, rumbling voice drove down and then back up again with a call of rage. Soon, it was high in an endless stream of curses that drove even more ponies from the area around the fountain in fear. As Carrot looked from behind the monument, he saw why. A carriage stood there. The driver and two ponies who were supposed to be pulling it looking on in horror. They tried to get out of their harnesses as a fast, great stallion circled it, foaming and hissing.
Come out here, you son of a bitch!
shrieked Corey, ramming his shoulder against the carriage so hard it shook. I recognize the smell of your damn cologne the second you crossed the bridge. Didn't think you ever had to see me again, did ya? The carriage shook as Corey once more rammed himself against the carriage. He saw the huge stallion literally lifted off its two wheels, the carriage only righting itself when the stallion skidded on the wet leaves that stood across the cobblestones. The carriage's horror, the loud screams of a filly foal began to rise from within. Never thought you had to see me again. The way you and your damn little cabal sold me out of the grocery market. Thought you'd never have to pay for leaving me standing in the street wondering where in the world you gone up to. Not leaving me a little bit. That what you thought, you goat bucking. Carrot stared on, fascinated at horror as Corey really ripped off the door handle of the carriage. As the door flopped open, Corey fell from running boards to the ground, crying in pain and then heaving for breath. Carrot looked up to the carriage. Then one day he saw the hard face of a well-dressed unicorn stallion, with his forelegs across the mare, and a little filly foal screamed in fear. The stallion was shielding them, even as fear grew across his own face. Oh, Celestia! Chloe! The unicorn stammered as though you were the only one realizing who this tossing earth pony was. That was years, decades! As Corey rose, he bellowed and roared. At once, the unicorn's magic snapped the door shut. In a rage, his eyes alive with wrath, Corey threw the handle away artfully at the carrots as best as he could with a trembling hoof. Carrot felt his hoof go to his mouth as he saw it strike the driver. The poor pony fell for the seat, clutching his forehead. Even as he fell, the other two ponies still fought to get out of their harnesses. One now tried to reach for his fallen partner. Corey climbed up the carrots and was literally ripping at the satin roof of tooth and hoof. Come out! Come out, you utter sucking goat bucker! He called as he reached within, ripping away at the carrots as long strips of satin came up around him, drifted to settle among the leaves that littered the ground. Carrot's heart went to his throat, his ears drumming. The sight of Corey thrusting through the roof of the carrots, the fearful shrieks of the filly within, the calls for help from her mother, the unicorn stallion calling to Corey. All these painted a picture of Corey in Carrot's mind that horrified him, a picture that made him shake and tremble. Never thought of that, did you? Never thought I'd actually be waiting for the chance to drag my due out of your hole, bellowed Corey. Now you're in Ponyville, my Ponyville, and here ain't nobody gonna save your... At once, the driver, blood streaming across his forehead, leapt for Corey. As the driver caught Corey, the stallion turned and kicked him and cursed. Corey! Erupted a familiar voice, one that sounded as horrified as Carrot felt. Carrot saw Corey's enraged fingers lift. Though desperation, a great flash of unicorn magic flashed from deep within the carrots. Once Corey fell backwards. He paddled through the air and went to the ground at the far side of his carrots. A quick motion on the other side betrayed the driver, giving Corey a kick, and receiving a hoof to his midsection and a reply that lifted him high in the air, instead of grasping for his seat. Go! Go! Called the bleeding driver. With that, the other two ponies grasped for their harnesses and pulled at the carrots with their resolve. With a start, it went out past the fountain to the road beyond. As it went, the cries of the foal hovered over it, disappearing in a horror soundtrack that lingered in Carrot's mind. Carrot stood there, beside the fountain, looking to where some small breezes kicked the leaves to inform where Corey lay. Okay, now is that breezes and small air, or breezies? Oh, small breezies. The big stallion lifting his head and fought to his hooves. Damn it, Corey! Came in a familiar voice again, revealing itself to be Ledger. As the other pony trotted up, Corey stood there, fighting for breath as his friend looked him up and down. I don't even want to know what that was about. Damn it! Spoke Ledger in a tone like he hadn't ended a mill long ago. The way that fellow was crying, I thought you were killing them. Carrot saw a look of shock go across Corey's face. Slowly, the immense stallion looked at Ledger. A look of realization growing on the face of a stallion, that suddenly looked a lot older than Carrot remembered him seeming. There was a fella? he whispered. Ah, answered Lizard. And his wife, too. What in the world's wrong with you, Cora? You said that. Oh, the well, look at you. You're still breathing, huh?
Garrett peeked from behind the fountain. To his immense surprise, he saw that Corey was taking deep breaths. Even the pounding of the stallion's heart seemed almost palpable, as though his huge frame was thudding in tune. His muscles rippled around across the tan coat, the shocks of gray among the black mane seeming more obvious as the stallion lifted his head and tuned to each breath. The autumn air sat around the fountain square as ponies began drifting through it once more, some looking on as Corey lifted his head and raised his hoof. Carrick could scarcely believe it when Ledger leaned in and let the other stallion brace against him.
Used to soon have a heart attack, Corey. You don't find a way out of this rage,
said Ledger in a voice Carrick could barely hear.
You'll be dead of a stroke of such, Corey, if you can't find a way out.
Together, they turned to leave the park, Corey leaning against Ivory's father like a prize fighter leading them from the ring.
I don't like being used, Ledger. I don't like anyone stealing from me, plotting against me.
The winded stallion said as he walked away.
I'm no pony's fool.
Carrot walked to the other side of the fountain. To his surprise, Ledger's eyes were on him, giving him a passionate glance. Carrot quickly nodded and began to speak. Ledger gave a quick shake of his head. Carrot closed his mouth. Ledger nodded slightly and contemplated Carrot for an instant. Ledger then turned to Corey and spoke as he led the stallion off.
Not every pony's against you, Corey. Not every pony wants something from you.
Ledger began with a sigh.
I hope you realize that before it's too late.
Carrot heard Corey give a small chuckle of disbelief. He watched the two walk off, a smile lost away he had just witnessed. There was no time to head to the market. Instead, he went back to his bakery and grabbed something he thought would make a decent lunch for Cupcake and his mother. As he did, he saw Corey. Wondered what made him the type of pony that would do such things. Wondered if he would ever find peace. He also thought very hard about finding any way he could to never end up on the stallion's bad side. He hoped that the treats he had been bringing him and his secretary every other week with loan payments had been helping. Carrot flung the food into the salad bags and went off once more to his mother's house. As he once more passed through the market square, he slowed as he saw pieces of satin still drifting about, the fragments catching against the fountain, mixing with the fallen leaves. In his mind's eye, he saw himself under the reins of the stallion. Mentally, he checked to make sure the check was due next week, not this. With a shudder, he trotted on. Arriving outside his childhood home, he glanced through the window to see Cupcake standing in the kitchen, pouring himself a glass of water and running over a serving knife from the tray of crackers and cheese. He opened the breezeway door quietly. The inside wanted even more so. He began to cross the quiet host towards the kitchen, hoping to surprise her. He smiled as he saw him making her shriek and then gather her into an embrace. He could certainly use one after what he had just witnessed. To his surprise, another phantom crossed on the far side of the room past the pantry and laundry room, and Mary laying her hoof on Cupcake's shoulder. As Cupcake jumped in alarm, the knife clattering in the sink, Carrick found himself lowering into the little alcove beside the door, the one where all manner of jackets and umbrellas seemed to go unused for years at a time. For the second time in that late morning, he watched two ponies in a conversation.
Oh, I'm sorry,
spoke his mother in an ethereal tone, the one that made all who heard it wonder if she was not just slightly ill.
I didn't mean to scare you, Cupcake. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, I'm okay. Just startled a bit, don't you know? Answered Cupcake with a small laugh. The two mares reassured one another. His mother's forelegs still held up to Cupcake. For a moment, she held his pose and slowly lowered it. Her head went down with it, and with a small sound, he saw Cupcake's head tell his don't worry.
Cupcake,
came his mother's voice.
I had to ask, what are you hiding from my son?
Carrot had to stifle a breath, and was glad that Cupcake's gas hid that as well.
Is it obvious?
Answered Cupcake.
He knows? He knows that there's reasons why I told him that there's still something. Please, Cheesecake. I'm doing it for both of us.
To his surprise, his mother lifted her head and laid it across Cupcake's withers. With small motions, Cupcake answered. She lifted her own head and placed it across his mother until a sigh fell from the older mare.
It's okay,
spoke his mother, her tone stronger than before.
I know. I'm a man too. We have our reasons for doing these things. We do these things to protect those we love from hurts and harm.
The mares looked at their heads and looked at one another.
You don't have to tell me,
the thin white mare continued, her golden brown mane falling across her face.
but Cupcake, don't let it keep you from love. Don't let it keep you from spending time in love, because it could disappear.
Garrett pressed himself firmer into the alcove, hidden as he felt his mother's words. Somehow he sensed that he was going to learn things that she had never taken the time to tell him, whereas things she had not known how to tell him.
I offered dancing and singing lessons. I had a wonderful partner I had seen years when I was your age. My markets are for cooking. It's about helping ponies find that special spark in themselves. Cheese can become a cake after all, you see. My friend and I, we would dance at clubs and offer lessons to culture we batted our eyes at.
His mother tilted her head back and forth.
I had this one colt, this one stallion who kept coming back to me. Kept coming back long after he learned all I could teach him. We danced long into the night, danced until morning. We glanced upon one another and watched the Celestia sunrise. It was then I realized why he was coming back. I was the thing he was special to him. He was in love.
Cheesecake's face brightened.
I fell in love with his love. Fell in love with him for loving me. I could see us together so clearly. Wanted him with me forever. And he did too. We opened ourselves to one another. Loved one another in mind, heart, and spirit, physically. We saw visions of our lives together. We opened up our magic and agreed to that love. Here in this house, in the room at the top of the stairs, on that very bed my carrot was conceived.
Didn't need to know that, ma'am. Carrot leaned against the alcove door, swallowed hard as he tried to let the facts of what was about to be stated flow past him. He looked up to see Cupcake placing her hoof on her mouth. He was called back to active duty as soon as I started the show. And every day it seemed I received a letter. He would ask how I was doing, outlined his plans for us, counted down the number of days until he completed his tour. Carrot choked.
Then one day they just stopped. Part of me wondered if he had found another pony, different mare. But I didn't believe it. I think of how he sat, how he stroked me and run his hoof across my stomach. Across his full. I wouldn't believe it.
Cheesecake lifted her head to face Cupcake, tears visible at the edges of her eyes.
Then, after 2 weeks, I got a letter from someone in his regiment. There had been an accident. He had been dead for 2 weeks. He was burned up in a magical fire. A training exercise gone wrong. Lost 2 weeks before, and I didn't know about it. Since we weren't married, the army didn't know to tell me. And the members of his regiment, only thought to do it when emptying his things found my letters. Well, later, I was in labor.
Carrot bit hard and tried his best not to make any sounds as the horrible noise of his mother's sniffles filled the room.
I never lost the feel of Carrot's father's love. And Cupcake, and as Carrot ungrew, I tried to replace it. When I thought Carrot was old enough, I started dating. But nothing. Tried to capture the feeling of love, but not the pain it could bring. I brought balance stallions to this house, to the very bed,
she said, choking at the end. Carrot bent down hard once more, struggled against the memories of uncles who lasted in her life for 2, maybe 3 weeks. Some pretended to be his friend, asked about his toys and hobbies. Some could not have cared less about him. None of them were worth remembering. One terrifying night, he had stood outside his bedroom door for an hour, as he tried his hardest to pretend to be asleep, the eyes of a stranger lying upon him. One night, when he was 13 or 14, he awoke to the awful, devastating sounds of one calling her things, yelling at her to do things. He would have taken a staring one in a heartbeat.
When I was 45, my hips started to show through my coat. Lines began to show under my eyes. The stallion stopped looking. I realized that I'd been trying to replace love with sex. It didn't work, Cupcake. It didn't work, and I was just left here in this house, alone.
His mother continued, voicing the truth that the teenage carrot had wished he would have had the strength to tell her.
But I realized that there had always been love in this house. The love of Carrot's father was still here. It was in Carrot.
He lifted his head, dared looked a little closer to the door. There, he watched as his mother raised her hoof once more, as though in pain. He watched gratefully as Cupcake gathered his mother's hoof into hers, as the two mares stood there in the sun that came through the kitchen window.
He earned his mark down here, in this kitchen, baking for us, making our meals. The day it came, I was up there. Came down at noon to find it dry. I didn't know that the carrot cake I'd thrown in had given him his mark until he came home. The damn teacher and his schoolmates knew about it before I did. I'm his mother! I was right up there next to some...
His mother gave a pained brawl and leaned forward, Cupcake gathering up.
He never stopped loving me. Never gave up on me. Always stopped at the top of the stairs before going off, listening for my breath. When I realized that he was the love of my life, I should be living for him, finding my love through watching him grow, I turned to him.
Cheesecake took another series of steady breaths,
and turned to him and looked up to see that he had already grown up, was ready to start his own life. I missed my chance to be a proper mother, Cupcake. I lost love twice. First the love of his father, then my chance to honor our love through his son.
Carrot blinked through a few tears, saw his mother lifting herself from Cupcake's withers. His thin, worn, haggard, beautiful, radiant mom looked down into Cupcake's understanding, rosy eyes.
I won't ask you to tell me what it is you're keeping from him or me, but Cupcake, I can see it's hurting you. My carrot, my son is full of love, Cupcake. He's alive with love. He loves you. He is. Yes, he is. I know he is. He's so wonderful.
Yeah, Cupcake answered, her own voice tinged with tears.
Don't miss out on it. Don't waste a second of it,
said his mother, laying her head to Cupcake's.
It could disappear, Cupcake. Whatever it is that's keeping you from opening yourself up all the way to him, to his love, don't let it rule you. Put it away as soon as you can, my dear. Let love deal with your fears.
Carrot stood there as perhaps the most profound thing he'd ever heard his mother say, drifted across the tiles of the little kitchen where he made so many breakfasts. As the two mares embraced each other once more, he quietly slid back outside. The young sun fell over him, golden and full. Leaves slipped down the street. Overhead, the pig's eyes flipped cloud to cloud, playing in the light. They were using the last few worn, pain days to enjoy life. Enjoy it before the snows were scheduled to fall. With a single sniffle, he turned back within the house. As he did, he made sure that the doors rang out totally behind him. "I'm back!" he called out, pretending that he did not notice him at the last second. "Oh!" he spoke in a satisfied tone of ignorance. "You're both here in the kitchen. I pressed the lunch." He looked upon him as his mother tried to hide one last tear. A Cupcake turned to him. He could not help but smile as the two mares he loved most in the world looked up to him with broad smiles of their own.
"It was so lovely to meet you,"
intoned Cupcake, leaning in for one more hug from Cheesecake, the older mare patting her on the shoulder as she did.
"Please, don't be a stranger,"
added Cheesecake, releasing the younger mare from looking to them both. Her blue eyes flashed with happiness at seeing them together. Her smile only grew when her gangly son leaned down and planted a kiss on the cheek. "I love you, Mom," he said. "Be sure to eat something for dinner, okay?" With that, they were off. At first, Carrot thought that they were heading back to the bakery. From there, Cupcake would leave him once more, head off alone to the place he had promised not to follow. To his surprise, he zipped past the bakery, so were no more than a street side garbage pail or a mailbox. He began, as he turned to watch his ginger-trimmed residence and place of occupation recede. Soon, he felt her leaning against him, asking for his strength. He went silent and followed her little turns. He caught up her offered hoof as he turned down the familiar streets. It's not that he had ever been to this part of Plainville. It's just that he never had any real reason to linger on roads with big houses and stately homes. At once, a thought went through him. At once, worries that she had been living in some sort of flop house, or been living in some sort of institution with curfews and rules against cult visiting. These all disappeared. Instead, he stopped at a corner under a lamppost. As the afternoon drew around him, Cupcake pointed to a large house that stood back from the road. Spread out before it, a long pathway led past a tall fence leading to a wide porch. The house itself was very strong and sturdy, looking with exposed pillars and a low look, one that seemed to blend into the landscape rather than out from it. To Kara's surprise, the same three fools who had visited him on Nightmare Night played in piles of leaves upon the lawn as their school bags rested nearby.
That's my house. That's where I live, she said haltingly. This is where I come when we say goodnight.
Kara started for a moment, then looked up into the house. It was beautiful. It was large. It was hers. It was hers? It's beautiful, he said as he took a step forward.
No!
She cried, grabbing for him. Rolf caught around his stifle and trimmed him a little. He turned and looked at her with confusion painted across his face. She was taking steps backwards, her hoofballs sounding out across the cobblestones. As he turned, she looked at him once more. Her rose-colored eyes flashed with thought. He sensed things were moving behind him. He followed silently, whilst their head flashing around and peered deep into the crowds of ponies that went by. They trotted up and within the gazebo, the same one where their first day had begun. No band sat within the spare space now. Only the cool breeze that battered the swarms of warm day met him there. Garrett watched as he trotted back and forth with a worried look. 1,000 questions went through his mind as he watched her. A worry he felt for Cupcake only grew. Cupcake, he asked, why didn't you want me to know about your house? I was worried you were living in a shack or... At once she turned to him, laid her head against his chest once more. He recognized his pose, what she was asking of him. Slowly he sat, allowed her to move deeper into him and lay her head there more slowly. As the yellow light began to fail, she spoke. He listened as she tried to explain what was happening without actually explaining it. She tried to detail the new twists and turns that this game of this was taking.
Get it,
she said, not raising herself from his chest.
Your mother, she told me something. Something that made quite a bit of sense.
It sounded a conversation that transpired in the kitchen.
I really want to tell you everything. Show you everything, but I can't.
She continued, a small note of panic in her voice.
I'm sorry, I just can't. I don't want you to end up like the other cults. I don't...
Carrot ran his head through her mane, parted the rosy tones as she continued to lie against his chest. She laid to him even more as he did, as though allowing some part of her worry to pass into him, each gentle stroke. He realized why she had done it, why she'd shown him the house, the large house where her nieces and nephews rolled about laughing on the lawn. He wanted her to open herself, and she had. She had as much as he thought she could. He ran his hoof up and down her back, caressing the hair as he felt her breath. She was trying so hard, trying to reach for his love while hiding something, still trying desperately to play the game she had set up. And once his visit of her lying close to him, secure his brace as the soft light dimmed over her, that visit filled him, and he longed for it. But right now, this was all he could offer. So he ran himself across her and let her breathe.
I know you're trying so hard to be patient,
she said as she wiped her face against his chest.
Waiting on me to... Please don't stop trying, Garrett. Oh, Garrett, please don't stop trying.
Of course, his body told her as Carrot drew her in closer, of course. As the cool breeze won the contest, great shadows of Celestia's sun faded around him, he lifted himself. He looked down to her as she looked up to him. Cupcake, how about some dinner? He asked. Then I could walk you part of the way home. Maybe just to the lamppost?
Yes,
she answered, lifting her nose and closing her eyes.
Oh, I think that would be nicely.
Slowly, they rubbed their noses. He took her up her hoof, and he went into the village to their dinner as the wind tossed the dry leaves across the path around the gazebo.
You know, guys, even as a kid, playing with my best friends, I did stories about me having a studio with all my productions. So you can imagine how happy I was to have this. But one of those things I always did when I wrote stories and such was to pretend that people used to interact with me.
that the characters were in fact actors, and I was a director, writer, producer, etc., etc. So when I started this channel and started doing all this, that was when I started messing around with just having Trixie be the star of Universe. Her friends were all the actors, and I just pretended it was me. But as time rolled on, I kept getting this idea of making Trixie into this domineering boss, one who controlled me. At first, I didn't know whether to make her more of a Dr. Forrester character, or just my friend. Over time, it just became a really good friend who was my boss. Of course, as time rolled on, I've added to the studio and the cast of characters. Every time I got a new plus or a new figure to hang around the studio, they just became a bigger part of the cast. Something for me to just enjoy to talk about and just laugh as I look around. Like I said, a lot of these things are just me telling jokes or hoping to find some way to make people listening to this laugh. I'm a storyteller, and that's what I love doing, especially when I'm playing with these guys.